So you're a triathlete, hey? How does that go down at the social parties and engagements? Only joking. I'm a triathlete through and through myself. In fact, it is one of my biggest passions in the sporting world. I've been doing triathlon since around about the age of 16 and I've totally loved it. And it's taken me right around the world, racing for the British World Class Performance Programme in the late 90s and now coaching many, many triathletes. I'm a massive fan of triathlon, so excuse the pun there at the start. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to share 4 tips with you for improving your swimming for triathlon. Let's start with tip number 1 about a wetsuit. Now, the interesting thing with wearing a wetsuit, and I've got an old prototype here, is most people know that a wetsuit will improve your buoyancy and thereby reduce your drag. And if you know that you swim in the pool with a pool buoy in and you swim a lot faster and a lot easier, well, guess what? You're going to feel much, much better in a wetsuit as well. However, there are a cohort of swimmers out there, mainly female swimmers, who find that maybe they don't swim any faster with a pool buoy in, and maybe they're conscientious about swimming with a wetsuit on and feeling like it's actually slowing them down. Well, guess what? Most swimmers I've found over the years, even those who think that they're slow with a wetsuit on, will actually be faster with a suit on. The problem is we're all very comparative when it comes to our triathlon at times, especially in the swim. And if you know that Joe Bloggs swims 2 lanes down from you and is around about 2 minutes slower than you over 1500 in the pool, and yet he's suddenly a lot quicker than you, or maybe up with your pace in the open water, you're going to be thinking that maybe the wetsuit is the thing that's actually slowing you down. But could it simply be that Joe Bloggs himself is 5 minutes faster with that wetsuit on? So before you consider utilizing a wetsuit and telling yourself whether or not you're faster or slower with one, do a little test in the pool. Pop your wetsuit on, maybe even borrow one from a mate if you haven't got one. But do definitely look at the different buoyancy profiles. For those same swimmers that I mentioned who feel like they're no faster with a wetsuit, together with Hoob Design wetsuits, we had actually created a wetsuit which had lower buoyancy than normal. The maximum standard allowance is 5 millimeters. We actually created a wetsuit which is around about 2 to 3 millimeters in most places, specifically in the legs, to avoid the legs lifting up a little bit too high. And suddenly, those swimmers who hated wearing wetsuits started to enjoy wearing wetsuits again. And it's not just female swimmers who find this. Many elite pro male athletes who tend to have come from a very good swimming background will prefer something with a little bit lower buoyancy. I know I certainly do myself. So get yourself a wetsuit, borrow one from a mate. You don't necessarily need to go out there and spend mega bucks initially, but do that little test for me first. Do 1,000 meters if you're up to that sort of distance, with and without a wetsuit, and what is the differential in a known environment like a swimming pool. If you can't do 1,000 meters yet, don't panic, maybe just try it over 200 meters, 400 meters, something where you can get some sort of comparison to really know just how much that wetsuit is helping you. But 9 times out of 10, if it comes to a choice between using the wetsuit and not, when it's borderline on the temperature, I would always say wear that wetsuit unless we're talking really, really short distances where the time taken to get the wetsuit off might offset any benefits you get from utilizing that wetsuit. Tip number 2 is one of my absolute favorites, go left. Now, this just relies upon a little bit of experience, both as a coach and as a triathlete myself. Most triathlon events around the world are utilized on a rectangular course, and they usually operate by swimming anti-clockwise around those courses, i.e. left-hand turns. On a left-hand turn course, it's significantly more advantageous to breathe towards the left-hand side for the majority of the time. On a right-hand turn course, yes, you're right, switch over to breathe into that right hand side. It's one of the reasons why I'm so pedantic about bilateral breathing, not because I necessarily love breathing every 3, but because I love the versatility that bilateral breathing brings to your swimming, the ability to go to the left or to the right. So why is it more advantageous to go to the left on a left-hand turn course? Well, typically when someone breathes towards that left-hand side, we normally see the right hand coming slightly across in front of the head. Now, that's not correct, of course. We'd want to have a nice alignment for that hand to go forwards. But if you are going to drift when you breathe into your left, 9 times out of 10, it will be towards that left-hand side. When you're on a right-hand turn course, if you breathe into the right, you're going to drift towards that right-hand side. So if you're drifting in towards the course, it's much better than drifting away from it and then having to constantly correct and add all that extra distance. And if you don't believe me, check out the majority of the world's best professional triathletes. Most of them breathe primarily to the left, because guess what? Most of the time they're racing, they're breathing, and they're turning to the left-hand side. Tip number 3 is an absolute classic, and it's something which not many people give enough attention to. Many swimmers in my squad, by and large, tend to jump onto the toes of the person in front of them simply because it's much easier and they can keep pace. Now, whilst that's not good for your long-term fitness development and it's a little bit naughty from a pool etiquette side of things, it really does show just how beneficial drafting in triathlon actually is. And studies have shown that it can save you up to 38% of your energy expenditure if you do it well. Couple of quick tips on this. You can either sit directly behind somebody or off onto their side. When somebody cuts through the water, it creates a little bow wave. You want to try to sit somewhere within that wake. And the ideal here would be, if this person is breaking the water, for you to sit on the side, sit on the hip, and actually be breathing primarily in towards the swimmer. You'd think to yourself, surely you want to breathe away from the swimmer so you don't cop a punch in the face or what have you, but by breathing in towards the swimmer, you can help to keep yourself really, really close and sit on the hip. And one of the things I like about this particular position is even if you start to get dropped, you can always revert to plan B, which is jumping onto their feet. And studies have shown there that you want to be a maximum distance of about 50 centimeters away from the toes in front of you. Now, you're not going to carry a ruler with you to measure that out, but that's just something you want to be watching out for, of course. So make sure you really benefit from utilizing that draft. And the best way of benefiting from it is to practice it in your training. Make sure your coach allows you to do this, or maybe even just get a couple of mates together and just practice it in the pool. It's a lot of fun. We do it regularly within our squads over here. Now, my final tip, tip number 4, is to focus on your kick. Now, if you know anything about me and my coaching, you might be looking at that and thinking, what's he talking about? Paul never really talks about kick. We don't do any kick sets in the squad. He kicks with a 2-beat kick. He hasn't got a 6-beat. Why is he telling us now to focus on the kick? There's 2 ways you can focus on your kick. One is to increase effective propulsion, and the other is to focus on decreasing drag. It's the latter of those 2 things that as a triathlete you want to be focusing on. Even the world's best pool swimmers only generate, distance pool swimmers that is, only generate around about 10 or 11% of their entire propulsion from their legs. If you're doing a longer distance triathlon, and by that I mean anything really from sprint distance and above, 750 meters, if you're utilizing a very strong leg kick indeed, you're wasting a lot of energy for that bike and run. But that doesn't mean to say, as I read in my very first triathlon article many, many moons ago, the title was, "You're a triathlete, don't bother about kicking." Well, that's wrong as well. You want to be focused on your kick from the perspective of trying to reduce drag. So this can be as simple as making sure when you point your toes out behind you, you've got your big toes turned slightly in so you can feel your big toes brushing against each other. It's a very, very small tip. It doesn't require any extra energy, just requires a little bit of focus. But if you can do that, it's going to help to save you a lot of time and make sure that you're getting out of the water with nice, fresh legs. So try and avoid over kicking. Focusing on your kicking doesn't necessarily mean to say you have to come up with a great big propeller or torpedo going on behind you there. It just means being sensible about how you're kicking. I hope these tips have been really quite useful for you for improving your swimming for triathlon. As I mentioned, I'm a triathlete through and through myself, and I just love the sport itself. So if you want to follow some tips and some training programs, we've got a plethora of those for you. Follow the little link below. Thanks for watching.